even in healthy people, the effects of COVID can last a very long time. And as well, the raging debate around hydroxychloroquine, it's getting politically ugly and we're way out of my wheelhouse. But oh my gosh, I got something to tell you. Hello, everyone. Dr. Chris Martin here. You're going to notice this looks a little different. Why? Because I'm on vacation. So you're going to hear in the background maybe birds chirping, boats going by, something happening. But I am taking a little break, and I thought for sure I was going to give myself this whole week off. But too much has come up for me to just let this pass by. So I'm just going to give you a quick update. And not the usual full lengthy one, but something. All right, let's move on here. We're looking now at the cases and deaths both continuing to climb worldwide at this point in time. You can clearly see that we're pretty much in an uptrend here, very strong uptrend here for cases, and deaths as well is now trending up pretty strongly. Not at the old highs that we saw back in late March, early April, but getting there. So if trends continue, we're going to see more of that happening. Why? Because we're having lots and lots of cases happening. So let's move on now to the controversies that came up. You might have seen there was a video that came out of a bunch of doctors talking about how hydroxychloroquine was a good thing. James Todaro, I'm here. I'd like to get him on as a guest and talk about all this. Says here, our video was taken down by Facebook and YouTube last night. Surprise, surprise. You know what YouTube video is still up from 2 months ago, though? The video with Surgisphere founder Sapan Desai on the results of the fake Lancet study that the WHO mistakenly endorsed immediately. So isn't that amazing that the Surgifraud piece, that it's fake data, fraudulent data, I haven't seen any major outcry from scientists or from the Lancet, from the medical establishment saying, oh my gosh, this was horrible. How did an absolutely fraudulent study get in? They still characterize it in media. They say, that study where it was retracted because they will carefully say the authors couldn't verify the veracity of the data. Yeah, right. It was completely fraudulent. And yet that Lancet study on hydroxychloroquine was used by the WHO, the FDA, lots of world bodies, state governments, all of that to withdraw the use of hydroxychloroquine. So we saw that happen. And that video is still up. But this video, which is a bunch of doctors coming out saying, hey, in our experience, hydroxychloroquine works, well, that was taken down. So this is, I tweeted back, I said this is where we are in the story right now. Fake and 100% fraudulent anti-hydroxychloroquine studies are A-OK with YouTube and Facebook, but a bevy of MDs speaking from their professional experience is not. Lives don't matter. That's it. Lives don't matter. Sigh. All right. It's really crazy what's going on with hydroxychloroquine. And we're going to have to study this from a political standpoint, a sociological standpoint, not a science standpoint. I mean, just check this out. Us humans have been taking hydroxychloroquine for 70 years. Billions of doses have been given out prior to COVID-19 coming along. You can search all of the records out there, and you can find even the WHO itself has a massive retrospective study put out in 2017, which went through all the records they had going back decades and couldn't find a single reported verifiable example, not one, of a person dying as a consequence of heart conditions due to having taken either chloroquine phosphate or its even safer cousin, hydroxychloroquine. All right, but suddenly, post-COVID, HCQ is a huge safety issue. It says here, remember this came out on July 1st here from the FDA. The FDA says, a summary of FDA's review of safety issues with the use of hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine to treat hospitalized COVID-19 patients is now available. The review includes reports of serious heart rhythm problems, kidney injuries, and other safety issues. It's just remarkable. Well, 60, 70 years of data, nothing coming up, billions of cases, all of a sudden it's like serious heart rhythm problems, kidney injuries, and other safety issues. This is bad. This is really bad science. All right, at any rate, we've had some studies that have come out recently that I haven't had time to review here because I'm on vacation, that support the idea that hydroxychloroquine is very effective. We've had other ones come out and say it is not effective. And again, just a cursory read of these studies are not being done well. The ones that are in particular that are pointing out that hydroxychloroquine doesn't work. It's a little disappointing, a little discouraging at this. let me be honest. I can't, for the life of me, understand how somebody could design a study in a way that would possibly hurt people. I don't understand why you would do that. Why, if you were studying this, you wouldn't give it early, give it in the appropriate dose, give it with zinc, give it with a macrolide, azithromycin, something like that, doxycycline, something like that, and then do careful follow-ups and look at that. Well, apparently that's just too hard, too much to ask for in this environment. So kind of crazy. I'm also seeing, I came across this that says this is the only chart that matters. This is looking at the number of people dying daily in Sweden. You can clearly see this trend right here. By the way, that's the same as the chart that you would see if you're looking at Switzerland or Italy or Spain. Lots of places have a chart that looks like this, and it's being presented as saying this is the only chart that matters because we're really only looking at the people dying daily from this. Now, I'm glad that deaths are down. A lot of this is due to maybe the fact that coronavirus has swept through the most vulnerable population first and killed those people. Maybe it's swept through a lot more of the population than we know. So it's no longer has enough victims to terrorize in that way. But as well, I think we really have to be honest about this and say that COVID-19 has impacts that go way beyond whether you live or you die from it. So I want to talk about that part again, because that's something I've been consistently pushing for, is for people to understand the totality of what COVID-19 is brought on by exposure to SARS-CoV-2. I think the impact of COVID-19 it's much greater than just deaths. This is a tweet string that came along from Hannah Davis here. And it says, I just crossed the 4-month mark of being sick. 4-month mark with being sick with COVID-19. I am young and was healthy. Dying is not the only thing to worry about. I still have near daily fever, loss of cognitive function, essential tremors, GI issues, severe headaches, heart rate of 150 plus, viral arthritis, heart palpitations, muscle aches, and feeling like my body has forgotten to breathe. Over the past 124 days, I've lost all feeling in my arms and hands, had extreme back, kidney, rib pain, phantom smells like someone barbecuing bad meat, tinnitus, difficulty understanding text, reading, difficulty following conversations, sensitivity to noise and light, nonstop bruising, thinking now can cause headaches. I'm not alone in the cognitive issues, as it's common a symptom as cough. No one knows when long COVID patients aren't contagious. Many are alone for months. So this just sounds terrorizing. We heard about, she wrote here about having lost all feeling in arms and hands, and we just heard about the case of that gentleman who lost all his fingers to COVID. There was the actor who lost his leg. So these are all due to the thrombi, the clots that are coming down, blocking the blood circulation, causing tissue death. That's how bad the coagulation disorders are here. So to Hannah and anybody like her, I would say if you are not on the Math Plus protocol, you really ought to be. And that's the one where you're on the methylprednisolone and heparin. That's the M and the H. Those two things really seem to do a lot. And of course, ascorbic acid, vitamin C, it does a lot. Very good things for people as well. And then there are a number of other things in that Math Plus protocol. But those would be, to me, the biggies. But look at that list of things. Heart palpitations, muscle aches, near daily fever, loss of cognitive function. You got GI issues. It's just a full body assault. And for poor people like Hannah, it just goes on and on. She continues, people with long COVID weren't able to get testing until late. There are people on my same timeline who are only now learning. They had strokes and encephalitis and heart attacks. MRI CT scans were only accessible in the ERs. Doctors were solely looking at the lungs for way too long. The symptoms, she writes, are bizarre. There are people with brand new allergies to the point of anaphylaxis. So continuing there, anaphylaxis is when your body goes into, a hyper storm of a cytokine storm where, we're familiar with people who have a peanut allergy, get exposed to peanuts and their throat closes down, swells up to the point they can't breathe anymore and they may die from that. Or they get hives all over the surface of their body, but they're basically getting hives inside their body too, say in the lungs. So that's anaphylaxis. That's when your body goes into overdrive. You need the EpiPen and then other supportive care to get out of it. Others who allergies have disappeared. Postmenopausal women who are having spotting in periods again. Medications spontaneously stop working, need to be adjusted, higher, lower. So talking about a complete dysregulation of the body here, from the immune system and how you respond to people's hormonal balances, medications not working, all of that, right? It's just, again, a full body assault. It causes flare-ups of other viruses, which we talked about last time, certainly Epstein-Barr virus. I'm worried about cytomegalovirus too. Past surgeries, other conditions, old injuries are raw and feel new again. My left leg and foot, injured in a moped accident in 2017, feels crushed like it happened yesterday. Intolerance to exercise, alcohol, caffeine, and stress are common. I've been hearing more and more about that. People feel okay, they feel all right, so they think they're going to get back to life. They get out of bed, maybe they try some light exercising, and boom, it just takes them down again. So yes, Hannah's reporting a lot of very common symptoms, and it sounds like it's not just a couple of things. This is a full body assault. It just sounds awful. She continues, insomnia is common. The dreams are vivid and bizarre, often lucid dreams, often violent and nightmarish. Many reports of dreaming about people who have passed away. The symptoms wax and wane. You think you're getting better only to be hit again. New symptoms appear constantly. So yeah, we've been hearing about the dreaming. First I've heard about lucid dreaming here. I've heard about the fact that these very disturbing dreams, violent and nightmarish, as Hannah describes them here. And yes, I've heard about people who have passed away showing up in people's visions and dreams. That was Chris Cuomo, the reporter, talked about those things, particularly the dreams, a while back. So this all is comports with things we've been reading and hearing about. And she continues here, the CDC is starting to acknowledge us, and the long COVID numbers are high. 35% of people are not back to normal after the suggested recovery period. Given the U.S.'s current cases of 4.2 million, that's 1.47 million long haulers in the U.S. alone. So I want to talk about this part where she's talking about what is the CDC finally acknowledging here. And again, I've always said, look, the CDC ought to be about going out and collecting all the data, finding out what works clinically, collecting all the clinical data, doing all of that. So it's not up to doctors, it's not up to people on Twitter, it's not up to Reddit communities to sort of begin stapling all this together. If there are people whose job it is to collect medical data, maybe they ought to do that and then present it back to us. Well, I think they've started to do that, and this shows up. The CDC says that 1/3 of COVID-19 patients who aren't hospitalized have long-term illness, okay? One patient whose symptoms have lingered for months called the report monumental. So this came out on July 24th. The CDC acknowledged Friday that a significant number of COVID-19 patients do not recover quickly and instead experience ongoing symptoms such as fatigue and cough. As many as 1/3 of patients who were never sick enough to be hospitalized are not back to their usual health up to 3 weeks after their diagnosis, the report found. So, yeah, 3 weeks after diagnosis, that's long. And certainly if that was the flu, if we said, hey, you could get the flu, and after we diagnose you with the flu, usually you'd probably have had it for a while. Symptoms would have been with you for at least 3 to 4 days, and then we diagnose you, and then we would say, yeah, but 1/3 of you, 3 weeks after that, you're still going to be struggling. And in the case of Hannah, we would see that struggling is like maybe too light of a term. Feels like that Hannah's really been, her life has been laid low, and her body is really under assault still from this thing. So continuing, this article says COVID-19 can result in prolonged illness even among persons with milder outpatient illness, including young adults. So this is new. This is kind of adding to our understanding here that when we say, oh, it's an old person's disease, the older you are, the worse it is. Well, this is saying, hey, this can result, not even can result, but often results in prolonged illness, even among persons with milder outpatient illness. And by the way, for people between the ages of 18 and 25 in this report, I believe it was 20%. 20% of that very young crowd, 20%, 1 in 5 chance, had prolonged illness with their exposure to COVID. So hey, 80% of them, regular, ordinary course, maybe no low symptoms to maybe even no symptoms at all, but 20% having a tough run of it. The acknowledgement is welcome news to patients who call themselves long haulers, suffering from debilitating symptoms weeks and even months after their initial infection. We've been reporting on this for a while now. This report is monumental for all us who have been struggling with fear of the unknown, lack of recognition, and many times a lack of belief in proper care from medical professionals during our prolonged recovery from COVID-19, says Kate Porter, who is on day 129 of her recovery, wrote in an email to NBC News. All right, so listen, we need to obviously consider more than just charts like this and say, this is the good news. The good news is mortality is down. The bad news is this is still a pretty nasty disease, and it leads to this syndrome of long hauling for a lot of people. In her one case, up to 129 days for that woman who just wrote in. Hannah's on the 4-month mark of being sick with COVID-19. And as well, we've been talking about other longer term impacts, heart, lung, kidney, neurological stuff. I don't have time to go into all of that, but there was this study that just came out on July 27th here, talking about outcomes of cardiovascular MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, in patients recently recovered from coronavirus disease. And so this is talking about really prolonged heart abnormalities. I can't go into the whole study, but here are the findings from it. So they looked at 100 patients that had recently recovered from COVID-19. And not all of them were, I believe that in this study, it was 2/3 were not hospitalized and 1/3 had been hospitalized. So they did cardiac MRI studies, which revealed cardiac involvement in 78 patients, so that's 78%, and ongoing myocardial inflammation in 60 patients, 60%, luckily it's only 100 patients, can do that math, which was independent of pre-existing conditions, severity, and overall course of the acute illness, and the time from the original diagnosis. So let's look, whoa. This myocardial inflammation was independent of pre-existing conditions, severity, and overall course of the acute illness. So even for people who had relatively mild cases or they had really strong cases, it was independent of that, whether you then showed up with having ongoing myocardial inflammation. And we talked about data like this a while back from heart studies that were using echocardiograms. Those are much less sensitive and much less provide much less detail than MRIs. So the cardiac MRIs are really giving us a much better view into these things. So that's pretty strong right there. To me, if you said, hey, you're going to have prolonged heart abnormalities in 78% of patients, independent of whether they had pre-existing conditions, the severity of their COVID-19 experience, overall course of the acute illness, all that. That, I think, is really important news. And it sort of says this is maybe not the only chart that matters. Maybe we need to start taking into account the experiences of people like Hannah, all of the people who are having a relatively long-term sense that they are not well again, and then the studies which are showing cardiac damage, lung damage, kidney damage, and then there are other long-term lingering neurological issues which we don't have good information on. We're wondering just how permanent it is. Those are much harder to characterize. All right, what do you do? Well, you got to be sure to get plenty of vitamin D. This was a great study that came out here. Vitamin D helps the body fight coronavirus, major Israeli study claims, okay? So the sunshine vitamin is really not a vitamin. It's actually more like a hormone. Vitamin D does so many things. It's not just a necessary precursor so that other building blocks can be made. That's what a lot of vitamins do. They're a necessary component that you don't have and you can't manufacture, and then you get that component and it inserts itself into an enzyme or some process. But vitamin D controls a lot of things, more like a hormone. It influences all sorts of things from calcium deposition in the bones to how your immune system is able to fight off diseases and things like that. So from that article, they said here, good levels of vitamin D, the so-called sunshine vitamin, help people to fight the coronavirus more quickly and effectively and reduce chances of hospitalization. However, others are cautioning broad conclusions, saying other factors may be involved. All right, now that's why I had to include that sentence because I hate that sentence. I hate that. Look, vitamin D has no toxicity. There's no downside to taking it unless you really, 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 really overdose, but that's hard to do. But you can. But I mean, as long as you're taking a normal, not dumb amount of this stuff, it has no downside and only possibly has upside. So why are we cautioning broad conclusions? What is that? What does that serve? Oh, well, yes, we see your data says it helps, but we need to caution that could be other stuff happening. Okay, fine. But doesn't help. Because if people could take it, that would be really great because it would really help. All right, her team, and that's this woman here, Frankel Morgenstern, Dr. Frankel Morgenstern, her team studied a 7,807 strong sample of Israelis who were tested for the coronavirus, and it found that the average vitamin D level for people who screened negative was in the internationally accepted adequate range, while the average for those who tested positive fell in the inadequate category. Vitamin D levels of less than 20 nanograms per milliliter of blood are considered inadequate. Frankel Morgenstern said that people in her sample who tested negative were on average within the adequate range and showed a mean vitamin D count of 21 nanograms per milliliter. So just 1 nanogram per milliliter over the adequate range. Those who tested positive were on average under the adequate level with a mean vitamin D count of 19 nanograms per milliliter. So those averages, those are pretty tight. The difference between 19 and 21 is not a lot. So I'd love to see the actual data. I haven't seen the study data yet, but that's a pretty interesting finding right there. And in conclusion on that, she said, oh, sorry, I got that top part twice. People who went on to be hospitalized after their test had a lower mean vitamin D count of 17 nanograms per milliliter. So people who tested negative were at 21. People who tested positive averaged 19. People who ended up in the hospital averaged or had a mean vitamin D count of 17 nanograms per milliliter. So take your vitamin D, get it up there. Make sure, if you don't know what your vitamin D levels are, get your blood tested. It's a very easy test to do. You want to make sure that you're over that 21 nanograms per mil. No problem at all being at 30 to 40 nanograms per mil. I know people who maintain theirs at 60, 70, even 80. Personal decision, but just this study alone says make sure you're over that 21 nanograms per mil. That would be great. All right, conclusions for today. The data, it continues to come in. COVID-19, terrible illness for far too many people. I'm really glad that the deaths are being controlled in a lot of countries, but the lingering sequelae, consequences of this downstream are just, for a lot of people, they're awful. And we don't know why yet, and we don't know how to prevent that. And I have to say, watching the ridiculousness that's going on around the vaccine development right now is giving me no confidence whatsoever. They're just rushing these things in, giving us mRNA vaccines, which are totally untested in humans, by the way. We know nothing about how they're going to react in our bodies over the long haul or anything like that. Maybe it's totally fine. Maybe it'll be totally not fine. We don't know, but those things are certainly being rammed through with a lot of effort and interest by the media, which, by the way, isn't very interested in telling you that vitamin D is something that could really help you here. They'll report it a little bit, but it should be front page telling people how to avoid this thing. And if they do get exposed, how to have a better outcome. We do know that recovery now is slow, really slow for up to a third of all patients, regardless of their youth or their prior health, that those things are not, that whole story about, oh, this just hits old people with comorbidities, as if that's okay, serves them right, or whatever the thinking is, right? That's not the case. Regardless of age or prior health, it seems that you can have a very long, tough run of this. And we don't know why yet, why that is true for some people, not others. Hydroxychloroquine is now a 100% politicized event. People have taken sides. Some doctors are on this side, some are on that side. It's really tragic to see. I wish we could just go by the data. Bad science and even worse humanity are now exposed in this whole drama, and yet they continue. So it just goes to sort of, I think, cast an indictment on current state of things. That's a personal editorial opinion of mine. Speaking of editorials, you could see in Newsweek, there was a fairly lengthy editorial in favor of hydroxychloroquine by a Yale epidemiologist. It just came out last week. And of course, he runs through all the things we've been running through on this channel for a while. And what I mean by, of course, just the logic of it, which is, hey, the downside is very, very minimal if there's any at all. And the upside seems to be avoiding dying or worse, getting a lifelong impairment that completely destroys your quality of life. If that's worse, could be for some people. If you can, avoiding that downside is enormous. Gives you plenty of upside in that story. So at any rate, he runs through the logic on the whole thing and points out just how politicized this is, and then points out lots of data showing that, yes, hydroxychloroquine works. But, of course, you have to give it early. And it's good to give it with its cofactors, which would be zinc and azithromycin. So if you do that combo package, seems to work really well for lots and lots of doctors and lots of different settings. But you give it early and you give it with its cofactors, seems to work. Okay, so that was a pretty good op-ed there. And again, so what is the harm here of hydroxychloroquine? So, it seems here that if it's safe, and what's the issue? Why are medical boards threatening to pull the licenses of doctors who prescribe this? The medical board would pull your license if they fear that you're about to do harm or irreparable harm to patients. That's a good reason to get your medical license pulled. Well, what harm would the medical boards be pointing towards when they say a doctor is in such a flagrant violation of their Hippocratic oath that they would have to pull their license because they prescribed hydroxychloroquine? What possible danger could they be pointing to? Because there isn't data of that right now. So at any rate, make sure you want to get plenty of vitamin D. Get lots of it. That'll be a really good thing. Lots of vitamin D. Get sunlight, that's fine. You can get tens of thousands of units in the sunshine if you have enough skin exposed and you have fair skin in just 10-15 minutes. Or you can take vitamin D as a supplement. Either way, it seems to be really important. We've been promoting that additive to help prepare your terrain for a long time. All right, that's it. Maybe you can hear the boats and the birds in the background. I'm going back to my vacation. Hey, everybody. Enjoy the dog days of summer here. See you next time.
Hi folks, this is Adam Taggart, Chris's co-founder at Peak Prosperity. To get your own resilient shirt, simply go to peakprosperity.com/shirts. Each shirt is made of 100% organic cotton and produced in the USA. And when your shirt arrives, please send us a photo of you wearing it if you feel comfortable doing so. We'll add you to our wall of proud Peak Prosperity members who are showing the world that resilience is the way to a better future. Thanks for watching.